All right, hey, it's Nate from the Bike Company. Welcome to something a little different we're going to try, which is a review of my Mondraker demo. But we're going to do it in twofold. One, I'm going to overlay some audio, and then two, I'm going to give you the live audio, because I went back and listened to it, and it actually is all pretty reasonable in terms of what I felt when I felt it, and I didn't misbehave too much. So here's the Foxy that I demoed, and you know what? Looking at it, there's a lot of stuff on here that's, as far as a demo, you know, you're trying to learn as much as you can about the bike, and this is a good example of really separating the frame and chassis design with the spec and the setup. It's an aluminum bike. I haven't ridden an aluminum bike in a minute. So, you know, that's a little bit different. It's aluminum handlebars, same sort of thing. The carbon fiber damps a little better. So the aluminum puts a little more load through you from the spike load. So that's one thing to consider. And then the weight, you know, for me, I don't ride super light bikes, but having the weight spread out differently is notable. Looking a little deeper here on the shock, we've got Fox Performance DPS. So this shock, being the performance, doesn't have the low speed compression, which proved to be, you know, really one of the things that I came back a lot to was, hey, I wish I had these compression controls. You know, the Öhlins shock, the Fox factory stuff that's got the compression controls is advantageous, and I think I would have really enjoyed it on this bike. So if I was really shopping this bike, it's probably an upgrade I'd be looking at.
Real compliant.
I'd up the volume spacing a lot for my weight and for the ground speeds.
Back end's a little bit more planted than the front, just maybe. It could be I'm running high PSI, try to make up for some of the compression and the volume spacers I would normally run. Ran through the rear travel a little bit there. All right. Wait for the nephew. It's his first trip down this. So, compliant rear end. With the factory shock, I think I would add some compression, get a little more pop out of it. Here comes Emilio. We're back on our way. Front end has me missing the grip too, with the extra compression and my volume spacers. Front end digs a little bit because of that, so I'm not getting the full idea exactly how the bike enters the corners. Back staying nice and tall. Gives you some power. Confident in and out of the corners. Woo. Bike's quick to change directions. Maybe it hangs itself out just a little bit. Woo! Little nose heavy through there. Stop and wait for the nephew again. Yeah, I'm gonna try to maybe up the compression on the grip just a little bit and get some more support. So I feel like the back end's outperforming the front end here. We got decent tire pressure front and rear. You having fun? Having fun?
Yeah.
All right, it's kind of more of the same for a while. So let's see. Yeah, that stiffer front end Even though it's through the compression on the grip, which isn't super sophisticated, helps the bike run a little taller the way I like it in the corners. Ooh, a little nose heavy there, a little nose heavy there. Find I'm sitting forward on the bike. Maybe riding a little nose heavy. Gonna be a little bit tepid, putting the bike in the air, but all in all of that could be dialed out pretty quick. Make sure I don't have to hike up for my nephew. There's that yellow helmet. Woo. Lost the brakes. Lost the lever, the brakes are still there. Cruise through here. Again, kind of finding that I'm riding a little front heavy on the bike. Be interesting to look at the geo. Whew. A lot of sections where really giving up a little bit of speed because I'm not 100% confident in the brakes, but partly because they're new, they haven't been bed in, partly because I prefer a little different feel, and I'm spoiled because I always run my other brakes. So kind of what I'm trying to take from that is going in a little slower, so I'm not having to jump on handfuls of brakes, because I want to test how the bike feels in and out of the corners. But if I'm having to brake way late, do all these things because the brakes aren't what I usually do, it's not exactly a fair test, because the bike hasn't reset its attitude into the corner. So I was trying to maybe slow down a little bit more, kind of confidently come in and let the bike feel what I was gonna feel. I would say real compliant bike. Zero suspension is plush. I ran through the travel a couple times. Maybe would have been better suited with some more compression. A lot of traction, even when you're getting on the power. So that's good. Mechanically, the bike felt like it stood up in the corners, which was nice. I'm also running at a mid-level compression, so I think I gave up just a little bit there versus a factory shock. But yeah, all in all, a real confident bike. A little more travel than I tend to ride, so I'll have to go back and kind of think of how that factors into a little bit of what I felt. One thing I felt, and it could have been the compression, was when I would go into a corner and lay the bike over, it felt really good and it would start to change directions really fast. But then it was almost kind of hanging on me when I try to force it into the last little bit of the direction change. Again, a very first ride on this bike, a lot of things going on. Aluminum bars, aluminum chassis, maybe didn't have some of the compliance that you're used to, or I'm used to. you know, laterally, or yeah, I guess laterally would be a good way to define it. But I think if I were to run a little stiffer front end, some more ramp, it would keep that front end up a little bit more. And I think that's probably what I was feeling on the bike not wanting to come around the last little bit. I think the fork was probably loading up and maybe slowly settling in through the corner. Because in the first part of the corner, it felt like it changed directions really, really fast, especially for a longer travel, you know, decently long wheelbase bike. So we're gonna wrap up the luge and then debate if we have the energy for a quick cross-country lap and see what it's about. It is slippery out here. I'm running a little higher air pressure to make up for the tires. Woohoo, shit. Oh. Have I ever told you how much I love my brakes? One of the hardest things about demoing bikes for me is the different brake feels. Oh, and being in the wrong gear. We're definitely gonna cut this part out. Definitely cutting out the wrong gear part.
When I go and I look at the notes I made, like I say, I try to suggest to people to make notes of 3 things you like, 3 things you're neutral about, 3 things that you would change. The 3 things I liked when I looked at my notes, suspension had a consistent, confident, planted feel, yet with power, the bike was incredibly efficient. It felt like it was shorter rear travel while it was climbing, found traction even in challenging conditions. And it felt appropriate acceleration for the increases in energy output. Now, those of you guys who've followed my stuff before, I'm not a climber. I get up the hill so I can go down. But the way I test that is I go ahead and I try to put a little sprint on it and see if the bike jumps proportionally to the amount of energy I've put into it. This bike was notable on that. It really did take that energy and was putting it down onto the bike real fast. My second note on things I liked, the bike stayed well behaved even when pushed past the forks ramp and compression. That's to say, when I got into some oh boy moments and undoubtedly was throwing my body around, the bike didn't spit me out, but it stayed real competent and neutral. You'll see that a handful of spots down the luge, actually, where it's kind of the front end's diving on me a little bit, and I'm able to stay on the bike pretty confidently. The bike had good support in rear corners. It felt like it kind of stood up in the rear corners, which is a great feeling, rather than sagging in and eating up all that energy. As far as fast cornering and fast changes of directions, this bike was really notable for that. And it must have been the mechanical design, because the shock was under ramped and under compressed for me. So the mechanical design on that zero suspension was really a pleasant surprise on this bike, given that, in my opinion, for my riding, the suspension dampers were probably, I don't want to use the word under-spec'd, but I would prefer maybe something just a little bit different with a little bit more sophistication. My 3 things I was neutral about: the geometry felt right for pedaling. It felt like you'll see one of the things I'm looking at for sizing is I've actually been pedaling with my palms on the bars instead of my hand gripping the bars, and similar to my Yeti, I find myself doing that when I look at the video. So it's it's progressive modern geometry, and it fits well. The other things, the neutral stuff, there's a lot on that bike that just is neutral. I had neutral opinions on. The wheel and tire spec was expected of what that category bike is about. It's not my ideal, but it worked fine. So I think I had 2 things I was neutral about. I didn't really write down a third. On the things I would change, brakes. It just brakes are a real personal thing, and you need to have what you're faithful in. And I run Magura brakes, I run 180 rotors, and I'm able to confidently use those without being on them the whole time. And basically stab my brakes on and off and know what I'm going to get. The brakes on the bike, I felt like I had to more or less stay on them a whole lot to see kind of what I was going to have. Sometimes I felt like they were powerful, other times I didn't. I'm not really out there trying to knock stuff necessarily, but it it really is a whole different ball game to have brakes that you like and you're comfortable and confident on. It was a first ride. They're brand new brakes. You know, there's a lot of caveats to this, but you know, Magura Shimano brakes tend to be the most popular for a reason. Suspension, I would absolutely change the suspension on this Foxy if it was mine. I would add something that had compression controls for fine-tuning the feel. And I'd also, you know, obviously pay attention to the volume spacing. So I'd be able to get the bike to not dive in the front quite as much and, you know, stand up a little taller in the back. So that's what you'd expect out of Öhlins or Fox factory suspension. If I was going to run the performance suspension, I think I could get it tuned pretty well with volume spacers. It might be a little bit of a dance to, you know, because you don't have quite the compression control, but with the performance suspension and some time with the volume spacers and PSI, you get it pretty close. And then I noticed my hands felt a little bit lower. That's just a demo bike, you know. So some of the things that I was noting on my body positioning and, you know, oh, I'm weighting the front end a little different, somewhat because my hands were lower compared to the, you know, essentially the bottom bracket where my feet were on the cranks. And again, it's just a demo bike, so you got to take that into consideration. So those are my notes. We'll see how this all gets edited together because I'm already 10 minutes in.
It's real even coming off the small lips and just kind of floating the bike. I'm not a big jumper, so you can take it all with a grain of salt, but the balance I can feel. And then my hands are a little messed up from some work I've been doing at home. So I'm not pulling real hard, so it's just kind of all floating. Ooh, cooked legs from the luge before this. Bike accelerates well. That I didn't like.